Hi, we made it to our last chapter, Kapitel 12, chapter 12, and we have to cover something that's pretty difficult to understand for most students, so please pay attention. And we'll have two parts of this, subjunctive, part 1 and part 2, present subjunctive and past subjunctive. Konjunktiv 1, Konjunktiv 2, no? So we're going to start, obviously, with the present time subjunctive. First of all, what is it? No? What is it in your language? It's when you present contrary to fact situations. For example, if I weren't here today, I would probably be, I don't know, where would I be right now if I weren't here today? Sleeping? No. Okay, cameraman is suggesting I'd be sleeping, but he forgot I have 2 little kids that would never allow me to sleep this late. Anyway, you get the idea. That's contrary to fact. Reality is the opposite of the subjunctive. So in reality, I am here. That's why you're saying if I were not here. And in reality, I'm actually doing this, and I'm definitely not sleeping. So that's a subjunctive, okay? And in German, the verbs you use are pretty different from the ones you would use in the English subjunctive sentences. So that's where the trouble starts, no? So take a look at our first example here. If I only had a house. Well, we learned that had, the past tense of have is hatte, no? But for the subjunctive, we say, wenn ich nur ein Haus hätte. Hatte is the past tense of the verb to have. It describes something real that happened in the past. That does not work in German for the subjunctive. The subjunctive is something that is unreal, contrary to fact, and it's now actually present time subjunctive. So we cannot use hatte. We use the subjunctive form of haben, hätte. Yeah? And we, of course, use wenn instead of if, no? Okay? So we don't use the simple past, we use the subjunctive form. Let's take a look at some of the subjunctive forms. Now, originally in older German, every verb had its subjunctive form. And they still do, obviously, but fortunately for you guys, some of the subjunctive forms of verbs are used less nowadays, and they're being substituted by just the verb würden, would, plus infinitive, which is a good thing. It's closer to English. Now, I would do this, I would do that. Ich würde gehen, ich würde machen, ich würde essen, da da da. Closer to English, no? But some verbs are still used in their own subjunctive form. And this is where the real confusion starts, okay? Sorry, but haben and sein and pretty much all modal, all auxiliary verbs have their own subjunctive forms. Hätte, wäre, würde, wüsste, dürfte, könnte, möchte. No? We learned that möchte means would like. Remember, I would like to go now, ich möchte jetzt gehen. Where does that come from? It comes from the subjunctive form of mögen. Mögen is to like, would like, möchte. So basically, in other words, you never say ich würde haben in German. I would have, würde haben. You never say that. Würde haben does not exist because haben has its own subjunctive form, hätte. Hätte means would have. Same thing with sein. You never say würde sein, I would be, never. Why not? Because sein has its own subjunctive form, which is wäre, no? So when you use one of these verbs, you never use würde plus the infinitive, never. They have their own subjunctive forms. Okay? And of course, you conjugate them. Ich hätte, du hättest, er hätte, wir hätten, ihr hättet, sie hätten. We conjugate them, obviously. Ich wäre, du wärst, er wäre, sie wäre, wir wären, ihr wärt. So we conjugate the verbs. And think about the meaning of the present subjunctive. Ich bin immer so spät. That is not true for me, by the way. Ich bin fast nie spät, ja? Und ja, was wünsche ich mir? What is my wish? Oh, wenn ich nicht immer so spät wäre. That's also not true here for me. Ich habe keinen Hund, doch ich habe einen Hund. But let's pretend I don't have one. Ich habe keinen Hund, wenn ich nur einen Hund hätte. Yeah, if I only had a dog. I can do it in reverse here. I do have one. Ich habe einen Hund. And I wished I didn't have one, wenn ich nur keinen Hund hätte. That's not true. I like my dog. Ich kann nicht kochen. All of these are not true for me. That's not fair. Ich kann nicht kochen. Doch. Ich kann kochen. Ich bin Italienerin. Natürlich kann ich kochen. Ich kann nicht kochen, wenn ich noch kochen könnte. Und so weiter und so fort, ja? So obviously the subjunctive describes wishes, things that are not true, not fact, contrary to fact, no? Okay, and then all the other verbs, the ones that you didn't see in the chart above, the non-auxiliary verbs, you can pretty much use würde plus the infinitive, just like in English. Was würdest du tun, wenn du nach Europa gehen könntest? Ich würde den Eiffelturm in Paris sehen. Ja, nee, was würde ich tun, wenn ich nach Europa fliegen könnte? Na, ich fliege ja nach Europa, also geht das nicht. I cannot say this. See, I do actually, I am going to Europe this summer, so in my case, I cannot use the subjunctive because it's contrary to fact. If I am going there, I cannot say, no, what would I do if I went? I am going, no? So, was würde ich tun, wenn ich jetzt in Europa wäre? That works. I'm not there now, so was würde ich tun, wenn ich jetzt in Europa wäre? Was würde ich tun? Ich würde jetzt gern in den Alpen wandern gehen. Ja, Ende Mai, Anfang Juni, ist doch gut, ne? Die richtige Jahreszeit dafür. Ich würde gern in den Alpen wandern gehen. Okay, gut. Und weiter. Yeah, of course we can also use the subjunctive for polite requests and wishes. For example, könnte. You all know the verb könnte from, I think it was back in chapter 3 when we did polite or indirect questions, polite questions. Könntest du mir bitte sagen? Könnten Sie mir bitte sagen? So we can also use the subjunctive for polite requests and wishes, yeah? Ich möchte gern ein Bier bitte. Ich hätte gern ein Bier bitte. Of course, this is our German book. We always want beer and drink beer in the German book. It's a great book. Ich möchte gern ein Bier bitte. Obwohl, jetzt ist es 11:30, ja, hier in Texas ist heute, wie ihr sehen könnt, der 30. Mai. Wo war das wieder? Heute ist der 30. Mai 2013 und es ist 11:30, also ich möchte noch kein Bier, es ist noch zu früh. Ich möchte gern einen Kaffee. Ja, ich hätte gern Kaffee. Two ways to say the same thing. Möchte means would like, we just said. Hätte gern also would like. No? Hätte gern, would like to have. So it means the same thing. Ich hätte gern ein Bier, ich hätte gern einen Kaffee. Ich möchte gern ein Bier, ich möchte gern einen Kaffee. Ich wäre jetzt gern am Strand in Florida. Oh nein, 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 ich nicht. Ich wohne hier in Texas, es ist immer heiß in Texas. Ich wäre nicht gern in Florida. Nein, es ist so heiß und schwül dort auch. Nein, ich wäre jetzt gern in den Alpen, wie gesagt. Yeah, see, I wouldn't like to be there now. It's always hot. Why would you go from Texas to Florida? Like, hot everywhere. Nein, ich wäre jetzt gern in den Alpen. That's where I would like to be. Ich wüsste gern. I'd like to know. Yeah? Ich wüsste gern, wann der Zug ankommt. Okay? Good. So, subjunctive, contrary to fact, wishes, polite request, polite questions. This is all present subjunctive so far, of course. Könnten Sie mir bitte geben? Könnten Sie mir bitte sagen? Yeah. Good. So let's go to the board now to talk about a few of the pitfalls and things you have to be careful about when you use the subjunctive. So, like I said, we need to take a look at some pitfalls, some differences between English and German subjunctive, present subjunctive for now, that are not explained in the PowerPoint we just looked at. For example, in English, you have the rule that says you don't use would in the if clause. You don't say if I would have, if I would win. In the if clause, you use the past tense of the verb, no? You might not even realize that because you do it, it's your own language, but that's the rule. Usually no would plus infinitive in the if clause. But in the other clause, the independent clause, you do would plus infinitive. I would buy, I would not work, I would give, okay? In German, this is not true at all. You do not follow this rule. The rule in German is if the verb that we're using in a subjunctive sentence has its own subjunctive form, like hätte and wäre and könnte and wüsste, then you use that. Doesn't matter if it's the if clause or the other one, doesn't matter. If the verb is one of the other verbs, not an auxiliary, then use würde plus the infinitive, okay? For example, if I had $1 million, had has its own subjunctive form. So we use that. Wenn ich eine Million Dollar, Euro, ja, Million Euro hätte. Had has its own subjunctive form, it's hätte, yeah? So we use that. Wenn ich eine Million Euro hätte. Now, buy is not one of the verbs we studied that has its own subjunctive form, so we use würde plus infinitive, yeah? Würde ich was würde ich kaufen? Ein neues Haus kaufen. Yeah? Okay. Right now you're probably thinking, well, it's kind of like English. Now we had, now we have hätte, would buy, würde kaufen. But it's just really coincidence. It's not, it has nothing to do with whether or not we have the if clause. It's just that haben has its own subjunctive form, hätte, and kaufen does not. So we use würde kaufen, yeah? If I won the lottery, win does not have its own subjunctive form. It's not like hätte or wäre or wüsste, so we have to use would here. In English, you don't. You don't say if I would win. But in German, that's what we say. Wenn ich im Lotto gewinnen würde. Ja? Wenn ich im Lotto gewinnen würde, work does not have its own subjunctive form, so we have to use würde plus infinitive again. Würde ich nicht mehr arbeiten. This is something that gets my students all the time, and most of them, when they write that little, you'll have to do this too, when they write their little paper about what would I do with $1 million, they usually omit one of the two würden because in English it sounds weird. If I would win, I would, and then would together, oh, that must be wrong. No, it's not wrong, it's right. Because gewinnen does not have its own subjunctive form, so we use würde plus gewinnen. Same thing for arbeiten. This is how you say it. Wenn ich im Lotto gewinnen würde, würde ich nicht mehr arbeiten. Ja? One würde belongs to gewinnen, one würde belongs to arbeiten. Okay? Good? And see, this is where I wanted you to pay attention, that we don't just use the past tense of a verb. We don't. And it has nothing to do whether you're using the if clause or not, like in English. It just has to do with, does this verb have a subjunctive form that is not too old-fashioned and, still in use or not, okay? This is starting to sink in and to make sense. Let's take a look at the next one. If I were rich, the verb to be has its own subjunctive form. Actually pretty close to this one, if you think about it. English and German were once the same language. Can you tell? We still have things that look the same. Yeah, were, wäre, no? Okay, so wenn ich reich wäre, give, we have to use it with würden, no? Würde ich meinen Töchtern mehr Geld geben, ja? Für ihre Studien oder so, ja? Okay, good. But remember, when you would, for example, say would be, if I didn't have to work today, I would be at home. How do you say that in German? Think about it. If I weren't here today, I would be at home. Wenn ich heute nicht hier wäre, wäre ich zu Hause. You would never say would be, remember? It's always wäre. Be has its own subjunctive form. Doesn't matter if it's in the if clause or after. Would be is wäre. So don't get caught saying würde sein, okay? Good. So that's it for the present subjunctive. Now you're ready to do your writing exercises, your little papers about what you would do with $1 million. You're ready to do all of that, and I'll see you for more confusing subjunctive stuff. I'll see you in a little bit for the past subjunctive. Tschüss!